Thank you for tuning into the Starving Artist Podcast, bringing you meaningful conversations on a weekly basis. As an artist, do you care about the money? If so, does that mean you are a sellout that is willing to dilute your creative ideas for the sake of financial benefit? During this discussion today, we will speak on the various perspectives of the sellout. And hopefully, you will walk away with something that resembles an answer. Today would have been a very special day because we would have had a very special guest with us, Aaron Clark, who is an amazing creative fashion designer, painter, and so many different ways. But unfortunately, he wasn't able to be with us today. But in the meantime, we're excited to engage with you in a very interesting discussion based around the sellout. So thank you for joining us. My name is Rocky Cotard.
This is Professor X, everyone, and this is the Starving Artist Podcast. All right. So we'll kick it to Katrina for social media.
The Starving Artist Podcast is a band of super talented, sophisticated rock stars. We aim to challenge ourselves and the status quo. Now, the Starving Artist Podcast Network is expanding nationally from New York City to Portland, Oregon, and broadcasting on local TV courtesy of Urban Media Art Studio right here in Malden, Massachusetts. Please support the movement by subscribing to our YouTube channel, Starving Artist Podcast, and follow us on Instagram at starving_artist_podcast. You can also find us on Patreon and listen to our podcast on Anchor, Apple, Google, SoundCloud, and Spotify. Rocky, Xavier, and I want to sincerely thank all who have been loyal ambassadors of the Starving Artist Podcast Network. But we ain't done, y'all. Stay tuned and check out the latest and greatest. This is your girl, Katrina, and I'm out of here.
All right, and we're back. So, a new episode here at Malden Studios. Very nice to be here. We got so much help on board.
Shout out to everyone.
Shout out to everyone. I can't even remember everyone's name, but you know who you are. Thank you for making this possible and making this happen. And we're going to kick it back to Rocky for the title of this episode.
So this episode is titled The Sellout. It really deals with what I mentioned in the beginning about, what is it? How do we connect with it? How do we interact with it as creatives?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes it's one of those words that becomes like a weight.
Yeah.
It's like once you hear sell out, it's like I got to turn around and go the other direction, because what I'm doing is not viewed positively. But for the first portion, X, I think it's very important for our audience as well. Feel free to be a participating member of the conversation. But it really deals with the definition of the sellout. What is the definition to you, X?
Yeah, it's a great question. As we're in pre-production with the team, we're talking about this, we're mulling it over and thinking about, what does that mean to each person? What does it mean to you? What does it mean to me? Mm-hmm. And I think when we're talking about this, you raised a good point about compromise. And are you a person who's compromising your values, your standards? Are you letting people walk on you? Is your voice not being heard? It's just one of those things where you want to be able to clearly define it. So I'm glad you asked that question. And I think that's where it kind of stems around the values, the standards, and are you standing up for yourself?
Gotcha. I mean, that definitely is a very strong component of it, which is like standing up for things that you've kind of already determined to be things that you care about. In terms of my definition of it, I feel like I went about it in a different way, thinking about what categories make up like a sellout.
Yeah.
Like what things would contribute to it, and I think maybe I thought of it in a different way. I just thought about it in this way. But the three categories that I came up with really dealt with the who, what, and when. So the who is, it's about you. Like that point of authenticity, it's, are you being authentic with your essential concepts?
Okay.
When it comes between what you want to do and what somebody tells you to do, which do you choose?
Okay.
So that intrinsic sense of, like, are you making that kind of compromise and choosing, like, hey, I really didn't like the way you made that nose, but it's something you're very proud of. How do you kind of compromise there and choose you? And then I also thought about the what. What are you making, And I think that also dealt with, like, clients.
Yeah.
Like, what are they asking you to do?
Okay.
Like, what are you comfortable doing? Which really goes back to what you're saying. And I think, oftentimes when it comes to client work and what they're asking you to do, it may not always align. It's like, hey, you're asking me to draw a tree and I only draw, turkeys.
Yeah.
So
They're adding to it, or the scope is changing and expanding.
Exactly.
I like that's almost like a detective. The way you started that, the who, what, where, why. I feel like you're in the detective novel where we're trying to set these parameters, trying to really understand, like, what we're talking about here.
Yeah, and I also think, like, the other piece too is, like, the time. Because I think in some ways, like, one could argue, like, spending time that's not related to what you care about, that can sometimes be, especially when it's excessive amount, like, you're selling out your time so that you can investigate something that doesn't really have anything to do with your goals and aspirations.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, when you say aspirations, that's something that's deeply, like, intrinsic to only you. Like, I don't know your aspirations. I may know some of your goals, some of the things that you want to do in life, but what truly speaks to you? What's deep at your core? That when I do that, I think of, like, Goku. But, like, what's right here? you know, what I don't know what speaks to you, and so you can't compromise on that, because that's what's going to make you. That's what's going to be your passion. That's what's going to bring your fire. That's only you can, bring that enthusiasm, bring that fire, and you have that that drive. So everyone has that. So that has to be clearly defined.
Yeah, and I think it's a very, like, tricky conversation too about, like, the sellout, because I don't think anybody goes into it thinking, like, I'm a sellout.
Yeah, good
Like,
point.
it's probably some essential thinking, and we'll definitely touch on that throughout our conversation. But I always think about, like, whose perspective, like, who's saying the term the sellout to the artist. And I want to make the differentiation. It's not, I purposefully, when thinking about this, was like, the Google definition doesn't seem, like, kind. So I really wanted to
Hey Google, define what type of person a sellout is.
According to dictionary.com, a person who betrays a cause, organization, or the like. Traitor. Informal. A person who compromises his or her personal values, integrity, talent, or the like, for money or personal advancement.
how can we actually discuss this term without really looking to mainly offend, but really, like, think about it in a more structured sense?
So you say you don't like Google. Did you look at the Urban Dictionary, or
No, I did not.
Did you just? Okay.
No, I did not. I didn't know what that was going to give me. Yo.
What's up, boys?
Yeah, but I also think, like, just following the trend of who, what, when, but I also think how you go about your art can determine things. For instance, like, going to art school, I think about how, as a painter, and I do paint, like, and that's like, it's up there for me in terms of creative outlets. Mm-hmm. But in a classroom, I never felt like the process they were prescribing to me worked. And so if I was to be that person that went about it the way that I was taught in a classroom, I don't feel as though I would have really atoned and felt connected to the field. But when I painted in the summer and just investigated the canvas within my own, like, rules, following my own, like, instincts,
Yeah.
I actually found that I was able to get much further, and even now. And it's not to say that what I learned in the classroom was invaluable, and some tools of it I was able to use, but in some ways, choosing to not, forego on my process for the sake of somebody else's process actually was to my benefit.
Well, it's funny you say that. You make me actually think of something different. When you say school, a lot of times there's a lot of options. Like when we talk to our audience, we're talking to people who are thinking about going to college, who are thinking about further their education.
Yeah.
Sometimes your parents will say, this is best for you. You should go down this path. Does that make you a sellout?
Yeah. Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking, yeah.
And I do struggle with the term sellout. But I think.
So I'll come back to that.
Yeah, I think it's
I don't
something
know. I don't know that there's a right answer there, because your parents are people who are going to be trying to care for you, trying to love you. They want you to do the best thing. But
I think I do have an answer for that.
okay, yeah, go ahead. I'm curious to hear.
I think in a way it does. Like, I hear so many stories about, like, students I have worked with, like students who are having like breakdowns. Like, I went to school to be a nurse, and I knew, not to like make fun of them or anything, but that is the story. It's like, I went to school to be a nurse, but then I knew I was creative and I was drawing my whole life. And now at this point, I've decided to shift my field and do something else. And it's
and
awesome.
how much time did they waste doing that?
Yeah, and it's not even wasted. I would even say time that you kind of have to repurpose.
Okay.
Like, you have to take that experience and fit into a different box, because maybe that's anatomy.
So maybe it's not wasted, but it's just time that you
Yeah.
experience. It's kind of like life.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
But I do think that in some ways that's like not proving true to your interests when you actually do have something that can resemble a choice. Yeah, I think in some ways that's definitely something to consider. But that's a good question, because oftentimes your interests may not go along with parents.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I do like that point. Yeah, so definitely for the audience, I would love to hear like their responses to it.
Yes.
Like,
Let
does
us
that
know.
count as a sellout? Does listening to your parents and going to school to do the thing that they asked you to do, does that make you a sellout? But sometimes it can also make you practical. I'll just throw that in there.
Yeah. I was
There's
going to say,
nothing wrong with practicality.
well, what if you want to do trade school?
Mm-hmm.
That's something completely different. That's a different type of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
What if you want a practical trade? What if one of your parents actually was a plumber, electrician? These are practical things that we all need. So, I feel like it's that slippery slope.
Yeah.
To really kind of
Critique.
define it. Yeah, to
Yeah.
critique it.
Yeah, at the end, I think like the preface, I would say, or like mid face, because we've gone past. I think I would say, folks, like, the conversation is not really meant to deter anybody from their pathway. It's much more to think about taking a path that's not authentic to you. How beneficial is it for you? And I think that's a very important concept. And so we will leave you all there.
To you. Let's start with you, Deborah.
Okay. What it means to me is family. And family means everything. Because when Garrett was diagnosed at the age of 5, and we had to figure out what autism meant, and what would be the best services for him, it took us on a journey as a family. And we thought about what the family needs. The family needs shelter, it needs food, it needs love, and support and resources. So our agency is designed to enhance the lives of everyone that has an individual with autism. And we do that by everyday living, social skills, healthcare resources, family support groups, and mainly resources. And the individual has to be active. We teach healthy exercising, healthy eating. The family needs to be educated about all of the services that are afforded to them, because you just are not born with autism and it stops at age 5 or it stops at age 10. So it's everything. That's what we want to address and affect the lives of individuals on all accounts. But we have a secret ingredient. We do it with fun.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. I got it. Let's go. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Ah!
Yes.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Oh my gosh. Ah. All right. That's enough. Thank you for coming back to the Starving Artist podcast. You were with us for the first portion, and then now you're coming in, and I obviously defeated X in Rock, Paper, Scissors, Shoot.
I usually win.
My name is Rocky, and no offense. But thank you for staying with us throughout our conversation on the sellout. And we definitely spoke a lot about the definition of it, and we'd love to hear yours. Now, we're really going to dive into personal testimonies on the sellout. And because I won, X goes first and tells us about his sellout story.
Yeah, so the best way to describe this is to say that it was a learning experience. And it was an experience that needed to happen, although at the time you could say it, like Usher, it burned. So I won't give any specifics like names or what company.
Oh, no tea.
No, there's no shade.
Can't do that.
Here.
That's not good for business.
That's not good for business. Right? So essentially, I worked at this place. I applied. I was kind of like thinking it was a long shot. When I got notified, I was so happy. I was at a place that I was collecting the paycheck, but I wasn't very happy at. I apply, I get the interview, I get a second interview, I knock it out the park. We start working at this publishing company. So I'm developing book jackets, I'm doing covers, I'm doing text. I'm learning about like the deeper nuances of actual book publishing. And so some time goes by, and one of the art directors mentions that my work is very safe and very tight. Like they felt like I had good work, but they felt like there was something that was missing. And they didn't say safe. They were just very like, political about it. So they were just very nice about it. Long story short, at the end of the probationary period, they said that we're gonna let you go, and I was like shocked. I was like, why are you guys letting me go? And they gave a really detailed critique, and it was really hard to stomach some of the things that I was listening to and reading. And so I felt that, I brought the story up because one is just it was tough to talk about because this was the best job I had ever gotten up until this point. And so I wanted to keep it. And that was the problem. I was fearful of losing it because I was like, I have to keep it. And that made me very tight. I wasn't creative. I was just doing things just to make sure that I did them. I did things on time. But that job, they wanted me to be creative. And they wanted to see like what I can do. Because in the interview, they were like blown away by some of the concepts I had. And I was just like, I made it, people, I made it. I was so excited. But in that corporate world, it's very cutthroat, and they wanted to see like a progression. And so I played it safe, and it was very hard at the end of that probationary period when they let me go, because I was like, I could have done what they were asking for. So, that really burned because what they wanted is what I could have gave, but I didn't give it because I was too scared.
Wow.
Yeah.
I am moved, X.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've never heard.
You know what? I never said that out loud. Yeah, I thought about it, and then I just, it was, I was young too. I was a young designer, and I learned a lot from that experience.
What is it? Like, if you had to say what are like 3 concepts, or even if it's one, dominant themes, like that has shifted your work because of that experience?
I would say the first one is go out guns blazing.
Wow.
Do not be, because what happens is if you get too safe, you don't even know what your own potential is.
Ooh, that's so scary and so good.
So that's the first one. I'd say the second one is, be confident in your abilities. If you got into a certain point, just be confident in what you can bring to the table.
Yeah.
And the third one is, know when to compromise. I think that comes with life experience. I feel like, once you get married, things, you think differently than when you're a single person, because when you're single, you're just thinking for just yourself. But when you get married, it's a totally different mindset. But I would say, like, learn how to make, good compromises, but not selling out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. I love that story, particularly because
Hold on, I need tissues. I need a Kleenex.
Me too.
Me too. I thought about it, so I was like, I'm not gonna get a watershed.
I think that's definitely something that a lot of people can relate to. I personally can sense it, and I can see it. It's sort of like it's in your hands, but because you're trying to protect it, you're not grasping it. So that's a beautiful story. I think, just based off of your work, my knowledge of it, you do go in guns blazing. Like X will be like, this is the show, this is the plan. We have every step up until the end. And so I can definitely see the effects. But does any part of you feel as though that experience do you regret it? Or do you think it's like an experience that the lesson you learned from it was more important? Which would you take? Would you take the lesson, or would you take the job back?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I don't know how to answer that. You know why? Because on one hand, it's made me who the person I am today. Like, it's that
pretty cool person.
Thank you. That critique was very strong. It was very like direct. When about art critiques,
yes,
they can feel very personal, but you have to be able to kind of separate your work and who you are from the work. But it's personal. It's like, I made this.
Yeah. Choose.
I don't know how to choose. I would say I don't like the way.
That you learned it.
Yeah, I don't like the
Yeah,
lesson.
that's like I would have chosen an easier way.
Nobody likes discipline.
Yeah.
But I feel like the discipline helped me in the end. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
All right, now I was trying to bide my time for my own.
Oh
study, 'cause I
yeah,
don't
it's
know how
your
to-
turn. Yeah, now
Yeah.
we get to put you under the fire.
I
I get
actually,
to ask the tough questions.
I feel like it's the other way for me, literally, and I actually mean it, because since the beginning of my creative process,
the beginning.
it's always like, hey, you got this assignment, you're gonna do the assignment, but then you're gonna save some time so that you can do what you want with the assignment. Okay. And I think there's also a danger there too when it comes to selling out. The reason I say this is because, for instance, I'll work with a client, and a job that would have been, a month takes longer. And then I'm sort of that person that when I hear that feedback and it's like, hey, let's like add this to it. Let's add this little bit of color that's gonna make it look exactly what you want. I'll take that additional time, but that's at a cost of my own personal creative process. Specifically, it's always like working on a project with a client and potentially not getting feedback or getting the information that I need to create more work as quickly, and so that may kind of get in the way of my own processes, because once I'm in the process of working with a client, it's a very different brain than working with my own work, because that's a lot more freer and I can be like, yeah, colors. So I think for me, those are the experiences, and it always is frustrating.
So when people, I think they call it scope creep, when they create, you're saying that the project becomes bigger because they're asking more that they originally
did not make clear.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I think that's like the other side of your piece, because it's sort of like, okay, I feel very committed to this and, putting me out there. And then I think what also happens is as they get more detailed with their requests, it takes out some things that you really like about the things that you made that are like intrinsic to your own work.
Okay.
And so, that's sort of the trap of it. And, it becomes, are you paying significantly enough that makes it so that I can do this process, and at times it's sort of like, as, throughout my work, I feel very confident that, hey, if you give me like a job, I'm going to do something that I really like, and I want you to really like it. But first, I want me to like it, because it's a representation. But anyways, I think this relates to the sellout piece, because I am, making making work for people, and it's not necessarily like my time is not given as much of an importance. So I'm selling my time, or a lot more of it than I had initially intended.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
So would you? I guess what would you do different then?
I think contract stuff, like being clear initially, would be my aim. Yeah. That's really the lesson. It's like every time I go into one, I'm like, see what happened here? I'm throwing it in a contract and saying this is not happening again. Another episode, but in the meantime, my name is Rocky Cotard.
I am Professor Rex.
And this is
The
Starving Artist Podcast.
Talent. Like I think Rocky